Well, we all certainly know that exercise is good for us mentally and physically, but what about when it comes to our memory? New research is discovering exercise can change how crucial portions of our brain communicate as we age. And joining us now to talk more about this study is Professor Mark Gluck. He is with Rutgers University. Good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning.
I'm fascinated by this study, and it's not necessarily something surprising, but I love the approach that you guys took. So tell me the basis of your study and what you guys learned.
Sure. So, as you said, we've known for a long time that exercise is good for our health and exercise is good for the brain. But two things we haven't really understood well is how is it reorganizing our brain? What is it doing to our brain? And two, why is it that some people seem to get much more benefit from exercise than others? And we've answered both of these questions to some degree in a recent study from Rutgers University-Newark, in which we enrolled older African Americans in 5 months of a cardio dance fitness class, sort of like a Zumba. What was important was it was really getting their heart rate up and going. And we know that this cardiovascular exercise is key. And what we found is we did memory and brain imaging before the study and memory and brain imaging 5 months later. And what we found was that for most of the people, after the exercise, the wires in the brain had changed, the connections in the brain had changed, so that the parts of the memory circuits had become more flexible, more able to connect and disconnect and reconnect, as if you'd been at a cocktail party where you were jumping around, talking to one group of people about one thing and then another group of people about another. In contrast, the people who didn't exercise, their brains were rigid. It was like a cocktail party where each part of the brain was talking to the same other parts of the brain for this all along the time. So what we're seeing is that exercise is allowing the brain to connect and disconnect and be flexible in who it connects with. But that also manifests as better cognition, because we found that the people whose brains became more flexible, their memories became more flexible. And by a flexible memory, I mean what they learned in one situation, they can apply flexibly in another. Okay. And so what's really novel about this study is that we've shown that exercise both rewires the brain to be more flexible, and that flexible brain translates into flexible memory.
Okay.
But there's a catch, which is that not everybody gets the same benefit. And there's a particular gene called the ABCA7 gene, which has been associated specifically with Alzheimer's risk in African Americans, which is one of the reasons we looked at it in this population of African Americans. And what we found was that these benefits, particularly the memory benefits from exercise, didn't happen in those people who had a risk version of the gene. And so this tells us that although exercise is good for our health, not everyone gets the same benefit from exercise for protecting their brain.
Okay, and that's of course something we wouldn't know, but so obviously the suggestion is for everybody to exercise, but I'm curious, so these improvements were in specific areas of the brain critical for memory and thinking. So as my viewers and I are listening to you talk, my first question is, how much exercise did it require to get the benefit? This was a cardiovascular exercise. Would that apply to other types of exercise like weightlifting, strength training?
So there's a great question. So the first is you talked about a specific part of the brain. It is. The part of the brain that we're interested in is called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus has long been known as a gateway to memory. It's the first place that new information, new facts, and new events come into our brains before they're stored all over the brains. And it's also the part of the brain where Alzheimer's begins, or the earliest stages of Alzheimer's happen in the hippocampus and around there. So what we found is that this critical area for new memories, this critical area that gets damaged in Alzheimer's, is becoming younger in effect with exercise.
Okay.
And that's why it's exacty where we want to see the changes.
Okay. How
now,
long exercise? Yes. I want to know,
what
do I got to do?
It's the cardio. Of course, ours was only one study, but a broad range of studies have shown that what's really critical is getting the heart rate up. Okay, and we often tell people you want to get the heart rate up to about 80% of its maximum. And the best way to know you're at 80% of your maximum, unless you're recording your heart rate, is that you should be able to feel your heart bumping against your chest, and it should be intense enough that maybe you can get a word out or two. But if you're just sitting there chatting with someone while you're exercising and having a conversation, then you're not at that level of cardio intensity that you need to promote brain growth and improvements in memory.
Okay, I'm getting a wrap. How many days a week do I need to do this to get that improvement?
Well, the recommendations are 150 minutes a week. So if you do 3 hours, 3 times a week for an hour each with some warm up and cool down, that's just about what seems to be the ideal sweet spot.
Professor Gluck, I think I can do that. Great information this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate your time with Rutgers University, and hopefully we can all learn from this. We could all use a little good brain health right now. It's so great to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.